Hey everybody, Edo here, and I am excited because James Mathe is here to join us. Say hello, James.
Hey, folks out in the internet.
And if you don't know James founded and runs Minion Games. He's extremely active in the Kickstarter community and sort of helping people get bigger, just on campaigns and Kickstarters and publishing and all that stuff. He's run speed dating and lots of different cons and just a whole gamut of things. Prior to the James of now, he has a spectacular entrepreneurial career. I was looking it up and I was like, who is this guy? So why don't we start there, James? Can you take us through sort of how you started your career and how you find it? Because you go through drive-through games and RPGs, and why don't you give us the little rundown?
Do you want me to start in the beginning or at the games?
Start at you were an engineer, and then something happened.
Well, yeah, I was a programmer, and then I was getting tired of doing the consulting work inside cubicles, and so I wanted to do something else. And I had my first foray into running my own business was the LAN networking back in the Doom era, and then we started selling Magic, and I was always kind of a gamer too, so that led me more into the role-playing kind of stuff. And then eventually I started selling products online from a website that I had started that was just giving out free materials for Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. So it got a lot of popularity. I started selling to them. Then we opened a store because we started stocking so much inventory. And then that eventually led to me having an interest in board games, and then I eventually got into doing more of the Minion Games kind of stuff. But also in between there was the which you mentioned, RPG Now. I invented in 2012 for PDF downloads for role-playing games. As a programmer, I was always trying to look for ways to, do different things in the industry, I guess. So back then there were no tabletop simulators and things like that, and so it was really hard. My vision was what if you just got a game night and you want to run a thing and you don't have a module in front of you? Well, if I just go there and give them a couple of bucks, they'll download a module and we'll play.
Right.
That was the idea.
And then you sort of make this. That was the RPG stuff. And how did that go? Just what's the quick story on drive-through from there?
Drive-through RPG was White Wolf's invention to try to compete with me, and then they eventually became very similar as far as total revenue, but they had a very specialized. The guy who runs it's been in the industry forever, so all the people that were chicken of using RPG Now for their real IPs, Chaos was one and other things like that. Big name companies went with them because they had a name in the industry, and then so we eventually I got all the indies, he's got all the mainstream stuff. Let's merge because then we'll have everybody. And get some business.
Eventually that becomes a problem, but at your size it was probably okay. Go ahead.
Anyways, and then the D20 came around that period, and that there's some similarities between D20 and the current glut of board game products, but D20 became super huge and filled up the stores with product, and really launched RPG Now and Drive-Thru RPG into the future, which they're still riding high on. But it killed a lot of the desire for role-playing products in game stores. And when I was running a game store at that time, I'm like, oh my god, D20 eventually crashed, and then a D20 was like a poison symbol on a product. So I'm like, what am I going to do? Oh, well, there's this other category of board games that has been growing 5-10% every year. Let's look into that.
Right. And actually, the whole... when you see industries like creative industries have this sort of explosion of content and a growing market, you can look at D20, you can look at mobile games, you can look all over the place to see examples of what happens when you have you can look at, Atari and NES, you can look at when there's just too much content, too much product, and how markets sort of collapse around that. And that's what a lot of people call it a bubble, and a lot of people are concerned about it.
Right. Also involved in there is somebody is in there disrupting the industry. So back then we kind of disrupted the RPG print industry. Nowadays Kickstarter is kind of disrupting the board game industry. It's everybody's coming at it different.
it's happened.
Right. So when it first started out, I thought, okay, well that's going to last a couple of years and then it'll crash, and it never did. So
yeah, for sure.
Great, but in the process, all game stores have a hard time to stock anything because it's such a glut of product out there. Even good games can't get in the shelves. I mean, I've got several well-known games, and I've got reports from demo crew that are around the country, and 90% of those reports come in not available to buy at the store.
Right.
And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, I'm hoping to do some Q&As with actually, I spoke with Mike Pascal, who was for distribution, but I'm hoping to actually talk to a bunch of retailers too, because I think the retail story is so important and how it's changing and moving around. But so to continue on you say, okay, there's this Kickstarter thing, I'm going to do it, and was the first Minion game a Kickstarter, or were there games that you did prior to that were traditional?
So I spent like a year going to meetups and stuff and learning every game I possibly could, and then I started designing some games. I knew a friend who was an artist, and then I knew a friend who was a layout guy, and they had their own games too. So I'm like, let's three of us make some games, and we'll put it out. And I was the business end of that stick, and so we each put out a game, and we probably printed like 2,000 copies of stuff. It was prior to Kickstarter, and they all sold maybe like 1,000 copies. So it was like, okay, this sucks. But we got printed.
Right, sure.
And I lost like 50 grand that year.
Ouch.
And I'm like, okay, I can't keep doing that. And then the following year is when I found Kickstarter, and we never lost money since. Right.
And even when I started, you were already doing a ton of Kickstarters. I want like 14, 15. Where are you at? What's your number of Kickstarters you've done?
It's probably about 20ish. Oh, I'm not as affluent as a lot of those. I mean, Mayday games.
Oh, Mayday is like, yeah,
it's like 70 or something.
Yeah,
but I don't just keep coming to the trough for another filling. It's not my business model to only survive on that.
Sure. But still, 20 is a lot of games. But so at some point you're doing it on your own, and maybe you were doing it before again, because I come onto the scene and then I just look at how everything is already sort of established. But when did you sort of say, hey, I'm going to participate, like, because you have some really important resources that are available to Kickstarter and publishers and creators, right? You have your jamesmathe.com website, which has just reams of things on, here's a list of reviewers, here's a list of manufacturers, here's a list of this, here's the percentage of, and some of it's a little dated, some of it's still on, but there's a ton of it on order with the stuff that James Stegmeyer does on Stonemaier Games. But then you also have at least two, probably another, because in RPGs, but you have the board game Kickstarter group, you have the tabletop, what are the names of the groups that you have on Facebook? Or
I don't know if I can remember them all, but tabletop game publishing also. So there's something there for Kickstarters, publishers, game designers, and also involved in the industry forum I'm an admin, and a retailer forum.
And so when did you decide to, how did you come on to adding that value to the industry?
So remember when I said one of the reasons I was able to get out of the programming world was that I was able to leverage my customer base, which wasn't a customer base, it was just a fan base. And so I originally had created this thing called the RPG Host Network, back in the days when it was kind of cool to network a bunch of sites together under one banner. And the way I made that popular was just offering as much free resources as possible.
Right.
I mean, it seems kind of counterintuitive, but
well, people, if you give people stuff, they'll come to the trough, right? I mean, you put food.
Right, they all came to the trough, so that's my thing. I'm going to say, I get them all to the trough, then I'll change their food. So I'm like, I'm in this mentality. It's like, okay, well, how do I get my name known out there and get more designs brought to my company? And I've never been one who hides numbers, and I'm not that corporate guy who's like, I won't talk about what my salary is, and I'm not, So I've always been kind of open with that. So I was comfortable with that. But I am not a writer. I'm not somebody who's comfortable even doing these interviews, and that's why there's very few of them.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here.
But so I'm like, okay, well, how can I write some stuff and put it in a blog that will get people to come to it so that they can know where to find to show me products. And around that time, I was also going to Protospiel, and so there was lots of information there to learn and share. And when I created my first games, I looked out for people to help me out. I mean, I think Zev from Z-Man back then gave me a little bit of info, but it was very vague. Like, where do you go printing? There was no answer to that question back in those days.
Right.
You asked a few people, and hopefully some people would answer. A couple of people were nice enough to do it, but most of them are all too busy or established or don't want to share their sources. I'm like, okay, well, this is crap. So there's a need for some of that information to be spread. I have a need to get my name known more.
Right.
I want to build some goodwill so that hopefully it turns around in my favor for Kickstarters in the future. So, and I'm not a good writer. So let me just make bullet lists, because I realize
they're very effective.
Yeah, so I realized at some point it's like my brain has a lot of information I think is just common sense, but there's a lot of people out there that don't think the same way or know the same things, and it's not common sense to them.
Right. And something I just want to bring up, because as you describe all this, you describe it in a very transactional way, like in a very like, oh, I did that to get this, and this got me that, and like, but. And I'm from New York. Where are you from originally, or where you live?
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. All right. Wow, that's a pretty nice town. But so being from New York, I'm used to just direct aggro people. Like that's like that's normal. That's like how you are positive to somebody is you just a jerk to them. And in some ways you have a reputation on those forums and sites of just being super direct, right? Like whether it's somebody just asking a stupid question, or somebody who didn't read the header, or somebody who didn't do something obvious, or somebody who didn't look, like you're just very quick to point it out. And I know that's, so I think there's a persona that you have that feels a little transactional and feels a little sort of direct. But from my experience, when we've met and worked together, just at cons or whatever, or even in general, like, I think it's more than transactional. I mean, this is my opinion, right? You could be like, no, it's transactional. But like when I see this stuff, like I think you're truly trying to be helpful and engage, and there's a directness and a bulletedness of what you do. But I've always found it to still be from a good place, and so I think some people have a harder time.
I mean, again, it comes back to my ability of writing. I don't express myself well in written form,
or maybe too well.
So. Or maybe it's just I'm right to the point. It's like, here's the items that you need to take care of, buddy, and there's no real question about it. Just do this. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. So yeah, in person, I'm much more personable, I guess. I did a lot of Protospiels, and a lot of people got to meet me there. And the first 11 games I produced, I think 8 or 9 of them were all from Protospiels.
Well, and the speed dating, right? I mean, that is another huge. I think I asked you at one point if you ever did the seedling review to see how many people had participated at a speed dating event you ran that then made a game that released.
Yeah, we've done some of that. We don't get a lot of response from it because a lot of times the people can't say that they're being published until it's published. But we started a BGG list at some point, and I don't think it's been updated. But there's at least 50 games out there that have been published because of our endeavors. And again, it may look selfless at the forefront, but my reasoning for doing this was I can't contend all these Protospiels. There's not enough Protospiels. I need to help make more Protospiels so I can have more access to games. I need to get more people to show up at these events so that I can have more access to games. And how about let's make a real easy way for me when I'm at Gen Con to get for a couple hours see a bunch of games. Well, okay, I'll do this speed dating thing, but I'll invite some other publishers because nobody's going to come if it's just me. So
it all makes perfect sense.
It kind of works out. Maybe my mind has a way of finding those niches.
Well, and actually, I think, I always try to have sort of a topic or a focus for these interviews, and obviously we could talk about all this Kickstarter stuff, but I think you've done that on other channels, and I've covered a lot of that stuff. But actually, the thing that I wanted to talk to you about and get you some perspective is, over the last year in particular, but probably leading up to it, I've noticed, and we've discussed a little bit, how you're starting to pull back from going to cons, you're not running all the speed dating events, it seems like, when you're doing this Kickstarter, like everyone sort of entering the funnel is just sort of like trying to fire as high as they can, get as many games as they can, more, to become a publisher. or a creator, or have a background, or make it their full-time job. It seems like you've, through a combination of the community stuff, the retail stuff, the Minion Games stuff, have sort of established, I mean, clearly have established your safe, but also, you've shipped a ton of games. So talk a little bit about where you are, because it seems like your business is starting to transition a little bit, or just your lifestyle is starting to transition a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just hit 51 last week or so, whenever my birthday was.
Happy birthday.
So I'm at the point, it's like, I'm probably older than most of the people I interact with, unless they've been in the business forever already. And I've got other forms of income, as we've talked about. So I'm like, I don't really do this just to make a profit anymore, but how much do I want to keep doing it? And so I'm just kind of, there's a lot of different reasons. Also, running a Kickstarter is a huge headache, burden, stress.
Yeah, I know all that.
All these different issues and logistics and people. So I've started to cut back on how many games I would actually want to produce. So it's, 1 or 2 a year is fine with me. And so moving forward, I'm just kind of more concentrated on my IPs that we have that have established themselves, because that's the other big drag on this, is that I'll put a game and it gets excellent reviews from just 12 different reviewers. I mean, so not every one of them is lying. And I put it into distribution and it doesn't even sell through its first print run.
Right.
And I'm a well-known-ish publisher for middle.
Yeah, retailers getting your games, right?
I don't spend a huge amount of money on marketing, so maybe that's part of my flaw. I mean, I'm not a perfect human, so. But things just don't go gangbusters just because I print it.
Right.
So do I want to keep taking more chances and doing all this work for 6 months to a year for a product to make a couple $100? And it's not always about the couple $100. As long as it's profitable, I'm okay. But it's just a lot of work for so little return. And so I'm starting to wind down to where I just I'm going to stick with some of my IPs at work. And moving forward, I'm not going to worry about timelines. If I can't make it in time for Gen Con, oh well. I didn't even go to Gen Con this year. It's just getting way too big and way too expensive and way too much of a nightmare to even deal with it. Starting to maybe look at some of the smaller cons, if that at all.
Well, and so let's pull that apart just a little bit. So one, you were mentioning your games that have been doing well on IP, and presumably one is Manhattan Project. Obviously, you have the first game. You did, then Energy Empire has been a big hit. You did Chain Reaction, which, at least, I don't know how that's done at retail, but the Kickstarter was huge.
It did pretty well.
Yeah.
Right, and then there's Dead Man Tells No Tales is our other big IP.
Right.
And we're going to do an expansion for that soon.
And so there's the expansion there, and then on Manhattan Project, you also have we're coming to the end of the dice game competition, right? You did a Game Crafter one, as well as like an in-person Pitch to Me one, right?
Right. So yeah, my IP is I decided this probably a year or two ago, and I'm like, well, I need a card game for Manhattan Project, and okay, then I did that, and that worked out really well. So okay, now I need a dice game for Manhattan Project. Let's see where we can go with that.
You'll keep, it works when they're good. It works when the games are good.
So, well, that's what worried me. I'm like, I can't just whip one together. So that's why I did a contest. So dozens of people are submitting submissions for that, and we'll pick from them.
Now, have you ever done a design submission? I mean, you've done the speed dating but actual contest like you're doing now?
No, I have never done an actual submission contest, so I don't really know what to expect. I think most of the stuff is due in a week or so, and so I've gotten 1 or 2 entries so far, and they're okay, but okay doesn't cut it in this world anymore.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And actually, it's funny. I'm pretty sure I played one of the submissions because there was a Gen Cant roll and write, and one of the games was like basically Manhattan Project themed, and I was like, it was just funny because it was like, this is much more of a dice game than a roll and write game. But maybe you'll see it. But
that's the other problem. I got to get over the fact that I got to live with that. It's a press your luck world or whatever. It's not all high strategy. I like strategy games. So
but that's
hard to judge them.
Well, it's harder to judge them. I mean, Chain Reaction showed that you could take it in a different direction, but obviously the core project is a deeper game, an Energy Empire. And there was actually you did a sequel, right? That 48 hours to midnight or whatever, 4 hours to midnight, or
it's 2 minutes to midnight.
2 minutes to midnight. that has not hit retail yet.
Or it's actually Minutes and Midnight. See, now you got me screwed up on my own product.
I don't know. But so
but yeah, so I mean that's from the original designer, and I could see myself doing 2 more games, and they're probably maybe one that's like in the War Games era where it's like DEFCON, and then maybe one in post-apocalyptic even.
Sort of feels like you could do one in Asia right now. I mean, like you may have to do a modern day. But yeah. But okay, we'll set that one aside. Hopefully, this by the time this video comes out, that's still just a bad joke. So okay, but let's just so you're saying, look, I've been working. I have all these games. They're coming out. Some do well. So it seems like you're honing in on your lineup. And would you say you're really just focused on? Is it more about, I only want to do a couple games, and the games I want to make sure are going to really hit the market and do well? Or is it more like, I'm only going to do a couple games, and I just want to do the couple games I want to do? Like, how do you approach that shrink? How do you approach that closing of the funnel as opposed to just getting stuff in?
I mean, I wish I knew everything. I understood I had a crystal ball, but I don't. Again, out of the, Manhattan Project, even though it's a big hit, it was probably my 8th game, 7th game.
Aldo likes to talk. He uses you as the example of somebody that sort of kept throwing the darts, and it wasn't until you threw your 6th or 7th.
So obviously, I can't pick winners every time like some people can. I mean, like Zev, he has from Z-Man, he has a really good eye for picking good winners, and there's a couple other people that really are good at picking them. So I've tried to help small publishers small designers get published by going to all these Protospiels, and I've printed, at least a dozen Protospiel games. Problem is most of those don't make any money. So I guess I'm kind of winding up in the fact that I'm no longer driven as much as I was in the past by just getting stuff out there for people. I'm no longer, I'm kind of semi-retired, so I'm trying to cool it down a little and enjoy life a little bit more instead of running ragged. Right. So I've got other income to support this if this goes south, but Minion Games still supports at least one person, which is what it is, me. So, so with all those things combined, I'm just I'm in a stage in my life, I guess, and it's more of a personal decision. I think that I just don't want to go chasing all these cons and doing all this work that's required. And maybe I'm setting a bad example, but
no. I mean, that's why I think no, but that's why I think it's so interesting, right? There's different points. I mean, for me, actually, board games came at a time when I was in the video game industry, and I wasn't in retirement, but I had 2 kids and a family, and I was not living up to my end of the bargain because of how hard I was working in games and how little time I was spending at home. And that wasn't like me going to, I mean, that was just me working 100-hour weeks. And it was at a large cost, and I had to sort of reset. And coming in again, I have a very clear line on sort of time I'm doing this stuff, time I'm doing my professional job, and then just family time. But I can also imagine if you're running that, running all the, because once things start taking off, people don't see all the work that starts pouring through. Like there's the Kickstarter work, but then there's the running the work and all the paperwork and all this stuff, and suddenly every evening's full and all your weekends are full and you don't have any time, right? So
yeah, I got a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. So
understanding that balance is, I don't think that's necessarily. I guess what I'm saying is, from my perspective, having learned lessons I don't think other people want or need to learn. Don't necessarily wait until the end to start figuring that out. Like that's something you can think about now and say, you know what, maybe I'm burning up my life a little too hard right now, and I should pull it back.
I mean, that's also my personality. If you look back at my history, I'm always switching the game up. I mean, I had never stayed at a company for more than 5 years. I get bored and want to do something different and new. And then I've been kind of semi-retired multiple times in my life. So it's like, but after a couple of years, you get bored and you come back and do something else. So who knows what I'll be doing in 5 years from now? But
well, and so on things like, because you've started these. I mean, you have the website and the forums, but then also speed dating. How are you handing off that torch, rather? Like how? I mean, hopefully, I would like to think that all the speed dating keeps happening. And do you have an idea of how you're going to sort of?
Yeah, I've pretty much I've worked with IGA, and they
Independent Game Alliance, right? That's IGA.
Right. Matt runs that. He ran. I had him run the speed dating at Gen Con, and he didn't screw it up majorly, so he can have the rest of them. So yeah, I'm trying to bail out of it. I bailed out of the ones run by Gamma because I'm just not a fan of Gamma, and they've messed with me too many times. But so Scott Gata was running those both at GTS and Origins.
And when you say mess with me, like changed your schedule around?
Oh, they promised me stuff like pages and. I mean, I don't want to get into it here.
Sure. Okay. No, but
they just never delivered on their promises.
Made it difficult to do the speed dating thing. Okay.
Yeah. And they'd always put me in rooms that didn't fit the game
right.
that I was trying to run. You know, they're just sloppy. And that's been there for years, anyways. So I have no love for them. But so I'm trying to maybe and I got a friend that's running the one at BGG Con for me. Because he's a heavy gamer and still super into it like I was years ago, and so he just wants to get down there and play. And I'm like, well, fine. Here's a free hotel.
That works. That works. But it's not like speed date. I mean, the win from the speed dating was you would pick a game or two out of it. But you don't get. No one pays for speed dating, right? It's not like there's entry fees or anything.
Depends. It depends on where you are.
Right.
So Board Game Geek Con doesn't allow for paid events.
Sure.
So instead of paying some money to make it worth the hassle, they just gave a hotel.
Sure. I get it.
Origins
so the convention's supporting it.
Yeah.
So they're like, hey, we really like it. If you do one of them here, we'll give you a hotel room.
Right. That's exactly what's going on. So, and then some other cons, I just do it for free, the smaller ones, and then the big ones like Gen Con and stuff, we actually charge a fee because we have, even with a $35 fee, we have 90-some entries, and it's like, whatever.
Yeah. Well,
we have to shoot that down somehow.
And actually, even just having the speed dating and then people having to work on sell sheets, I mean, there's a lot of value that comes out of it, even if you don't end up being the selector.
You can consider it a process, a class of how to present your products, even if you don't get picked up. You certainly learn a lot going through the process. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I think I want to say directly, I've only actively participated in one of them where I was sitting at the table, but I've been to a number of them and watched them and seen everything running around. And I mean, I think it's actually really a great system for lots of designers to meet lots of I mean, that's like the whole speed dating thing, right? But I think it's super effective.
There's been a few other places that I think Unpub started doing one of their own, but I just let other people. I didn't like stamp a TM on it and say this is mine.
Yeah.
Here, whoever wants to run one, just set it up, just like Protospiel. I mean, just if you want to run something, just set it up. So I'm hoping that IGA kind of runs the main ones, and then they're going to go to a lot more cons, so they might run some in more smaller cons. The biggest problem with that event is that it's all geared around getting publishers to the table.
Right, you got to reach out.
If you don't have publishers at the event, then publishers don't usually come out of the woodwork just for the speed dating.
Right. So like a Protospiel becomes hard. It's really that you got to attach it to larger cons. Right.
Right.
So okay, and we're coming to the 30-minute mark in a few. But as you look forward, right, and you're like, okay, I'm sort of I've come to the conclusion that cons are a big hassle, and I don't want to be sitting in a small booth and doing the things, and it's not worth it to me. I have these IPs that I'm building and growing and nourishing, and you might consider starting to market to them too. But when you think of yourself in Minion Games in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, do you see yourself continuing to just do less but staying pretty active, or do you think it's sort of like, oh no, Ed, in 5 years I'll be doing something else? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think I've been more active on the Facebook end of things since I've got more time on my hands. But
That's true.
So I check in there more often. But I think I'll continue to be involved to some degree. It's how much involvement I'm not exactly sure. There's a lot of problems with this industry, but one of the big problems with this industry is there's no way for me to say, okay, I went to Gen Con and I saw this bump in sales after Gen Con and blah, blah, blah. You don't even see that. There is no direct correlations. And it's like, if I go to Gen Con, I'm hoping to pay for my bills there. And for years, I went to cons and lost $800 at every con I went to. Okay, well, that's marketing. Well, after 5 years, I'm done marketing my brand for $800 every convention I go to, busting my butt.
Right.
So when I stopped doing it for a year, which was this year, I didn't go to a single convention this year.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that big of a shame.
I said last year I'm done with this after Gen Con. I'm like, I've had it. It's a lot of work, and I'm a lazy effer, and so I'm gonna do what's easy for me and still survive and to a level that I'm used to living. And I went to no conventions this year, and I've done probably more sales this year than I've ever done. So
Well, something speaks to the focus, and also, clearly you are very strong online. You're very strong, in social, in community, and it's a little bit about playing to your strengths and the type of relationships you're good at building, and it may be that this sort of marketing. I mean, it's always a struggle for me because I have not figured out the sort of marketing publisher piece of the equation, right? Like I know,
right? Totally. Don't get me wrong. If you're a publisher in the first 2 or 3 years of your publishing career, get your ass to a convention.
Right.
I mean, Jamie Stegmeyer didn't do it, and he still survived. But he just does such stellar communications and stellar customer service, right. And just gives customers everything they ever wanted. I don't have that personality. I want to give them every single thing they ask for. It can be done without it, but as a new guy, you need to be out there and you need to get your name known, and you need to make more than one game.
Yeah.
If you want to be a publisher, otherwise you're just another flash in the pan. And but after 5 years, then you got to decide. Well, I'm kind of in that middle point. It's like I'm not big enough to have a big crew that goes to the convention and does it for me, so it's not such a burden on me.
Right.
And I'm small. I'm not so small that I need to get my name everywhere because a lot of people know my name already. And
sure.
How much marketing do I keep doing? Well, I mean, I guess a marketer would say you never stop.
I actually think at some point, I certainly have always, I've sort of not pushed my brand in terms of pencil first, like even on the box, it's super subtle. But at some point you look at it and it's really the games that take off more. Like I think at some point, some brands certainly are big enough where they're like, oh, that's a game by this company.
Right.
I'm going to look at it. But I still think most of the point, it's the spike of the game, the entrance in the game, and then word of mouth and viral marketing, all the stuff you do around it. But there's, is it more about the brand or the company, or is it about the game? And I think more and more now it's leaning towards the game because there's so many companies, right? It's not,
right. Well, there's so many games too.
And so games, right?
it's now it becomes pretty much like, well, what is the major hit this year? There's been a lot of companies in the past that have tried a lot of different games, but keep coming back to their one main game that sells. And they've lived for 10, 12, 13 years off of just one main brand. Flux is that way, and Zombies from Twilight Creations, and
all those things, that's for sure.
They're very, what I would consider one-hit wonder things, but all of them have produced a dozen games.
Right.
So I'm okay if I got my one Mayhem project and things fall to the side. I mean, I'd rather it wasn't that way, but each time I try to throw another dart at the wall, it's like another average shot. Hopefully not too whiffs.
Yeah. Well,
but I mean, the games are well received and they sell reasonable, but it's such a saturated market and everybody's cautious. They don't want to end up with another D20 glut with tons of product in their shelves that they're all just not ordering.
Yes.
I mean, there's people telling me constantly how hard it is to get Mayhem Project over in Europe. It's like, well, why should that be?
Right.
I mean, we're in all the distributors worldwide.
Right.
We have plenty of stock. Why is it hard to get my games that are highly ranked in Europe?
Right.
Because the retailers aren't asking for it and the distributors aren't ordering enough.
And the person who's asking, go tell your store, right? So listen, James, it has been great to have you on. I think it was you have a very, very unique perspective in the game industry, and hopefully there was a lot of valuable nuggets for those watching. But thanks a lot for joining, and to everyone else, thanks for watching, and see you next time.
See you guys.